Hello and welcome to the Man Met Philosophy Society podcast. Today we have two wonderful guests, Harry and Megan. I guess we could call it a Royal Rumble. So, all right, Harry, introduce yourself.
My name is Harry Thompson. I'm a philosophy student in the second year. I guess will that do for a
I guess that could do. We'll work out more along the way. So, how about you, Meg? Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Meg. I'm a third year philosophy student.
So, I was about to say, Meg, to begin with you, as a third year, what is your dissertation on? Because all third year philosophy students do a dissertation. Like, what are you doing yours on?
So my dissertation is on, basically my title is, does God determine the way humans behave in civilization? So obviously you can split it two ways. You can do the abstract notion of God, like the idea that he's like this person who can see everything and you want to please him. So like the religion, church, Catholicism, all that. Or you can do his actual physical controlling being. So you can do whether he has the actual ability to control how we act. So I'm just weighing up which side would be best to argue from at the moment. Yeah, it's really interesting.
What are you leaning towards?
It's good.
What are you leaning towards? Like, what side are you leaning towards, Meg? Like, to argue, like...
I'm thinking that it'll probably be, I don't know, like I think I'll have to argue that he does determine the way humans behave in civilization, but from like a religious standpoint, like rather than it him being like this controlling being who has the actual ability to like interfere, it'll have to be more of a abstract idea of him and like divine command theory and how religion influences our lives and like how he could be our conscience, like the conscience of the voice of God. I think that's more the way I'll have to go with it, because I feel like there's a lot more you can talk about and more sociological points of view you can bring in.
Definitely, like, because I mean, you could argue that religion was invented. Like, I mean, religious theories were made probably because like people just theorized about the universe, where we all came from and stuff. But you could argue that organized religion was created as a means to control people. Could you argue that? Meg, what do you think? Meg, do you think you could argue that it was created as a means to control them? Yeah, but I was about to say though, Harry, what do you think of this idea?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You can say that religion is very much a man-made thing.
Yeah, like I mean, Harry, what would you say about this like idea? Like,
does God control? What was the thesis again? Does God control the way we behave in society?
Yeah, that was it. Like, does God control the way we behave in society? So, we're kind of looking at it not just from like a metaphysical point of view, but from a sociological point of view.
So, like, how are we defining God? Are we defining God as like the Christian kind of dude in the sky who's like the creator of the universe and who controls everything from like a second person point of view? Like, my answer would depend on what you mean by God, I guess.
I mean, what do you mean by God, Meg? Because it is your like dissertation.
I mean, I guess from my perspective, I'd have to argue a Christian God, like guy in the sky, created the world in 7 days kind of point of view, because that's personally what I know of. But I think more research, because obviously I'm only like the second week into properly deciding it, will kind of define that for me, and then I can hone in on it and make an educated decision afterwards.
Okay, so
I think.
Yeah, like, how do you feel like on that basis about like, you know, the sociological implications of that God, the sociological implications of Christianity? How would you would you say that God controls people in that way?
I mean, that's a difficult question because that's not the way that I would think about God. You know, like from my point of view, like all there is God. Like I think that I think that our self, you know, is God. You know, there's the self of each of us. I'm like that's a difficult question. Trying to think what the sociological implications would be of like a really existing Christian God. Obviously, there would be the implications would be radically different from the way that I ordinarily think about what it would be. I mean, I guess.
Like, 'cause I mean,
If we're living under like some kind of universal tyrant, you know, like obviously we would have to appease that God, and like you know the Mormons and stuff, and the Christians where the pray to the God and stuff so he doesn't throw them into hell. I mean, I guess we'd have to center our lives around appeasing God, wouldn't we? If
mhm,
it exists in God like that.
definitely like 'cause I mean also like that belief in God, like I mean I'd argue that that belief in God, like sociologically, it can make people a lot more like restrictive. Like it can make people like a lot more fearful of like what they do, which in a way like it can make people more moral, as they're more likely to make good decisions that won't like send them to hell. But if a lot of the time they're basing their decisions on like the Bible, like a lot of the time, because a lot of it is picking like the best parts out. Like I mean, a lot of the time they use it to justify their control of people, their restrictions, if you get what I'm saying.
I'm not sure it would make people more moral because they might behave more morally, but they would just be trying to appease God, wouldn't they? It wouldn't be from any kind of genuine sense of like camaraderie between men and stuff. It would be like they're just being good so that God doesn't smite you. Kind of.
Yeah, like how do you feel about that argument, Meg? Like,
I think that's a perfectly reasonable argument, to be fair.
I mean,
Sorry.
don't worry about it.
Yeah, sorry. That was my sister ringing. I don't think I personally thing is like from my point of view, like I don't know yet. This is a very up in the air thesis that I haven't discussed and like researched to the full advantage yet. So it's hard to say whether I agree or disagree because I just don't know at this point.
I mean, I was about to say like to add some like food for thought or whatever. Like you could argue that that belief in God, like that restrictiveness, it can corrupt people. Like let's say for example, a lot of Catholic priests, like not trying to stereotype people like here, but a lot of Catholic priests, because they've been like they've been sexually repressing themselves, that causes them to act out and do also all sorts of crazy shit because of like the way they view God. Like, so couldn't you argue that if because God is this all powerful being, it's the way you view him that like causes you to act however you want. So it's not necessarily God doing it; it's more your like subconscious. Could you argue that?
Yeah, no, I am looking into this a lot. Like this is what I mean by like the abstract idea of God. Like it's almost your awareness of him and you thinking, oh my God, I've got this God looking over me, that makes you want to act in a way to please him. It's not him physically being like, this is the way you should act. And then it is kind of like subconsciously in the back of your head. I'm doing a lot on like Freud and just like subconsciously the way that you want to please this figure, this like almighty figure that you causes you to act in a cause of events. And like in that way more than his physical being.
Yeah, because
if that makes sense.
yeah, because I mean, if he is an almighty figure, like so the only way we can really perceive him is how we want to perceive him. You can't really perceive something like it's kind of like Cthulhu in a way, like or a Lovecraftian beast. Like you can't perceive it, but we just kind of interpret it how we want to interpret it in a way. Like
Yeah.
You guys are talking about God as if he's some kind of physical entity. Like,
yeah,
is that men at the Mormons believe that? Like the Mormons believe that God has like a physical body, so you could literally go up and shake God's hand. And that seems to be like the way you're talking about God, like he's some kind of like you can meet him,
yeah.
which I find is a strange idea.
But I was about to say though, with your view of God, like your view of God as everything, like how would you say like that applies into like Meg's like thesis? Like how would you say?
Well, I wouldn't say that God's everything because that would imply the existence of things which God is. I'm just saying that there's just God, because like if you take an example of something, like that's something that you would label as a thing, like a building or a person, I would say that building or person is just an experience in God's mind. So the thing doesn't have any existence of itself. The only thing that exists is God itself. You know, how that would lead into Meg's thesis would be how we relate to each other in society. It's like, you know, we're reading the Republic now in our group, thing, and it's all about how the city relates to the person, and like how justice with like society. So the way that relationships would change, if it, like for instance, if I believe that all there is God, that means that I'm God, you're God, next God. There's just God. So what that means is that you are myself and I am yourself. Like there's no real difference between me and you. Like, so like for instance, me harming you would be just as illogical as me harming myself, because for the boundary between you and me, I can't find any such boundary. All I can find is God's infinite being. You know, so how that would relate to the way that you would interact with other people in society would be that it would be like a foundation of justice. It would be like a foundation of peaceful relations between people, because you would see each other as yourself, kind of thing.
Like, because I mean, I was about to say that could very much lead into a pacifist mind state. Like, you could very much apply that and say, like, hey, don't kill because you're killing a part of yourself. You're killing a part of your, even if you say it's a part of your experience, like you're killing part of your experience. You're wiping it off the face of the earth. So in a way, like,
kind of. I mean, you can't really kill God, so like you can't really kill anybody. But what you mean about pacifism, but like that anything that you do to another person, you're doing to yourself, because really all there is yourself, God's. So,
but what? Carry on, Harry.
So if there's no difference between people, and there's no such thing as individual selves, and all there is God's self, then that provides like a foundation for harmonious relationships between people, so-called people, because we see. Oh no, you were saying about pacifism, weren't you? So yeah, so it wouldn't lead to a totally pacifistic outlook, because it means that everything that you do to someone else, you do to yourself. But for instance, if you're attacked in the street, it doesn't mean that you would just have to let yourself get beaten up. Or that if your child misbehaved, you wouldn't be able to punish them, because punishment would be the best thing to do in a certain situation if the child misbehaves. So it wouldn't lead to being totally passive.
In a way, a good metaphor for that is kind of like acupuncture. It may hurt, but in the long run, it will have benefits. Could you argue that?
Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes it is necessary. Like if you didn't punish a child, the course of their life, they would probably end up a pretty not a very nice adult, maybe. So sometimes that is the best course of action. You operate in such a way, because you would understand yourself as reality itself. You would operate to the benefit of yourself, but by yourself, you wouldn't mean some kind of individual entity. You would mean reality itself. You know?
No. I was about to say, Harry, like, I mean, you have a very unique outlook of the world that I haven't really heard from anyone else. Like, how did you come to this realization?
Well, first I started listening to this guy called Aram Watts, who popularizer of Eastern religions in the 60s. And he kind of led me onto it. But then I moved on to a guy called Rupert Spira, who pretty much says exactly what I'm saying now, you know, about all there is God, and he's very kind of clear and stuff. So he's my main source.
I mean, what drew you to Aram Watts? How did you learn about him?
Well, I just found him on the internet. I think that at that point in my life, I was a little bit depressed, and I was looking for something a little bit meaningful. And just what he said made a lot more sense, because we're all laden with kind of preconceptions and ideas that we learn from childhood because of the culture. And I think that a lot of those ideas that we have are kind of inherently depressing. Like that I am a physical body, and when this physical body is destroyed, I'll be destroyed, and we're all going to die, and blah, blah, blah. And when you start getting into the Eastern stuff, it turns out that none of that's true, really. And what you are is God itself. And so you can't die, really, because reality can't die, you know, and that's what you are.
No.
God's being.
I mean, honestly, like, that's a beautiful way of looking at the world. Like, I mean, I feel a lot of people got into philosophy, like, or are drawn to certain philosophies because it, like, it's used as a means to escape like some sort of mental turmoil, like mental trauma in a way. Like, for example, definitely not now, but when I was like 15, going through some shit, like as you do as a 15-year-old, like I kind of got drawn to nihilism, like, but no, absurdism, not nihilism, but I used to call it positive nihilism, but now I just realized it was like absurdism, like, oh, nothing matters, but just take the world as it is and just enjoy it for its absurdity in a way. Like, how about you, Meg?
Yeah, I quite like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I quite like the way you just go with it, go with the flow kind of stuff. But I think my dissertation is going to open my eyes up a lot more to the way everything works. I think this is what I'm hoping for.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of agree with both of you. I think listening to what you want to say, that yeah, harmonious relationships, yeah.
I mean, because like, did you jump? Is there any philosophies in particular that you jumped to when you had like hard times, or like would you say you had any philosophies that like let's say when you're going under hard times, like that 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 you were drawn to?
I mean, I don't think I have one particular one.
No.
But I do kind of follow a lot of the like more harmonious kind of philosophy, in the sense that you talk about more like, I say more like morality and ethics. So like when I'm going through hard times, like the stuff that I can do to help others, I think really inspires me. So like I'm trying to think of what it's called, but like stuff like utilitarianism and I'm trying to think of the one that I really want to talk about. It's called, but I can't remember. And like value ethics, stuff like that, just really like motivates me and really it shows the world for like what it really is and like the way we work and stuff, which is what I really like.
Because I mean, also like, what are that theory you said, you don't remember the name, but what are its basics? Like, what kind of stuff?
I think it's basically the idea that if you're going to do something, you should do it for the pure reason that you're doing it for like the good, because it's right and just. I think it's Kantianism.
Kantianism, yeah, Kantianism, yeah.
I think it might be Kantianism I'm thinking of, but it's like where you do an action just because the action in itself is
good. Yeah,
that's it. I think that's quite a good philosophy to live by, and I think all this stuff will be a counter argument towards like whether God does determine our actions, because like how can he if we're doing things solely because we know they're good rather than for some selfish motive.
I mean,
so
yeah, definitely. Like, also speaking of that, speaking of ethics, like, and applying that into God, like, how do you feel about religious-based like ethics?
I don't really like it. I think it's a load of rubbish, to be honest. I don't know. I just feel like religious-based ethics can lead to a lot of harm and a lot of conflict in society. Like, some of it's good, like natural law and like the idea that God's given us this these like principles to live by, and then if we live by them, we're going to create a harmonious society. But there's also a lot that probably isn't very applicable to the liberal society we live in now, and it can lead to a lot of harm and unjustness.
I mean, who here's wearing a cotton shirt? Who here's wearing a cotton shirt? Because if you are, then honestly, like, you're a sinner. You're going against God. You're honestly, like, I mean, but there's so much that, because it was written 1,000 years ago, like, and also for something so like great, something so vast, like you can't really interpret its will really. Because I was about to say, speaking of the existence of like the Christian God, like, Harry, didn't you write an argument, like didn't you write a refutation of the ontological argument?
Yeah, I did. That was my best essay. I think that the highest mark that I got was for that essay.
What'd you get?
85, I think it was.
95?
No, 85.
Oh, 85.
Yeah.
Damn.
I can go through that argument if you want. And
Please do. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear your...
Well, it was about Anselm's ontological argument, which is that, so Anselm reckons that God is that than which nothing greater can be thought. So God is the infinite, and you can't think of anything greater than it. So he says that if you understand that definition, and then that definition exists in your mind, that thing, but it can't just exist in your mind because it's that than which nothing greater could be thought. So if it exists in your mind, then it also has to exist in reality.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's in reality. But I didn't really criticize the argument. What I said was that he gets tripped up by his own implications because if Anselm, he can't disprove his own pre-existing beliefs because he thinks that faith is the condition of understanding. So first you have faith, and then you understand the universe. You don't get faith from understanding. The faith comes first. So if he managed to disprove, if his conclusion contradicted his pre-existing beliefs, you would have to abandon his argument. So what I said was that if God is absolutely infinite in all possible respects, then Anselm and God can't be two separate things. Because if God is completely infinite, you can't have God and Anselm, because then there would be some kind of barrier on God's being. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You could think of something bigger than God in that case, because if there's God and Anselm separate, you could think of a more infinite God, which is a God which is both God and Anselm at the same time. So that contradicts Anselm's Catholicism, because in the Catholic worldview, you have the Lord God and his subjects, and they're two separate things. So really, the implications of the ontological argument lead to pantheism, which is for Anselm.
I mean, I've never heard that take. Like, I've never even considered that. Like, maybe that just feeds into your, pantheistic like worldview. But I mean, where else did you hear it anywhere else, or was it just your own idea? Like,
well, in my view, God is infinite. Yeah, so that's where it came from. That I thought, well, if God is infinite, then God and Anselm can't be two separate things, And then that's to the way that I think, because I follow a philosophy called non-duality, which is all about finding your own worldview to see yourself as God. And so one of the arguments that it gives is that, well, if God is infinite, you can't be separate from him. There can't be like a little separate self, a little separate human self, and an infinite God over here. It has to be the same thing.
No.
You can't find any boundary to your own being. So if you can't find any boundary to your own being,
definitely not
the being of God.
Yeah, but what are your thoughts on that theory, like Meg? How do you feel about at a first impression? Like, what's your first impression of this? This idea of the ontological argument.
I mean, I think I've always found the ontological argument very flawed because I studied at A level and then again in first year. And I mean, I've never thought of it in like a pantheistic sense, but I really like your take on it. I think that is very, very true because I guess as well, because it's quite a subjective argument like that than which nothing greater can be thought. Well, I'm sure we can all think of something that's great in our sense that isn't going to be great in someone else's sense. And then that's where the problem would come in, because you'd have loads of little mini gods popping up all over the world. And then that wouldn't be infinite, would it? Because, you can't. I mean, it's a new take and I understand how you did so well in it because that's quite smart. But yeah, no, I've always thought if you want to believe in God, it's a very bizarre way to justify your belief.
Yeah, because I was about to say my way of thinking was always that if God is the greatest God can't be the greatest in like every single attribute because some attributes contradict. So let's take justice and mercy. God has to be the greatest justice and he has to be the greatest mercy. So but in certain situations justice is a lack of mercy and mercy and vice versa really. So God can't really exist because something will have to give. And if he's the greatest in everything. Yeah, but I was about to say how if God is everything, like you say God is everything, couldn't you use Occam's razor and cut out the middleman, really? Like, couldn't you say that God isn't necessary, God is a redundant concept, or...
I wouldn't say that God's everything, because that would imply the existence of something other than God if I said that, because that would imply the existence of things which God is. But I'm just saying that's just God.
Yeah, because what's the point of God then? What's the point of God if it's not... Because things only exist in opposition to other things, really. Like, what's the... Because I know you say God, like, only like, God doesn't exist in opposition to anything, but then is God really a thing?
No, God isn't a thing. God, I would use God synonymously with consciousness. So when I say God, I mean that which is aware of all of your experience. So like you have various experiences of various different objects, and both those experiences are known by you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
do you know what I mean when I say that your consciousness? So like all your experiences appear and disappear, but all experiences appear and disappear against a certain background, and the ordinary name, the colloquial name for that background is I, and the fancy for it is consciousness. It's just the knowing of experience, which never goes anywhere. So all experience is known and passes across this known field. So it's like a TV screen, and the experience is like the image on the screen, but you are the screen because you, consciousness, never come and go. You know, you never appear or disappear. You're always present. So that's what I mean by God. I mean consciousness.
Yeah.
I forgot, what was your question? Because I said that to an answer, but I forgot what I was going to say.
And
what was the question again?
The question was, couldn't we cut the middleman out? Do we need the concept of God? Like, surely,
And then you said that God would have to exist in opposition to something else, and if he doesn't, then he wouldn't exist.
Yeah, because things only really exist because they aren't other things, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
something is... Yeah, what are you about to say, Harry?
But if you focus on yourself, and like any experience that appears in you and is made of you. So really you, consciousness, are the only thing that you ever come into contact with.
Okay.
Experience anything other than yourself. Because if you take the example of something that seems to be other than yourself, like a black hole or a star or whatever, really it's just an experience appearing within yourself. So what is it that you would exist in contrast with? Because if you only ever experience yourself, and you definitely experience yourself, because you know you directly experience your own being, you don't exist in contrast with something else. Because even if you are aware of nothing, like you could say that you're being in contrast with nothing, but even nothing, you would have to be aware of that for it to be. You know?
Yeah, because I was about to say though, to contrast this, like everything you're saying, everything that exists is everything that you're aware of, basically, really.
All that exists is awareness, and the things that you are aware of appear in awareness.
Okay.
Like a dream, for instance.
Yeah. So I've got a thought experiment. I'm just trying to pick your brain here, but let's say you have a room, just a normal room. Then you have there's no way of experiencing it when the door is closed. Then what happens is you light a match, you throw the match into the room. First there's a little fire, then you close the door, and then the fire gradually fulfills the room. But no one's aware of the fire. There's no way of being aware of the fire. But then we open the door, we just see a massive blaze, a massive inferno. The process to cause that inferno still happened, even if it wasn't part of awareness.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Purely then, that's something that isn't awareness.
Awareness isn't a property of the body. So
Okay.
like that's like a fundamental assumption that's like drilled into us from childhood, is that awareness is like a product of the body. So when you think that when you close the door in your example, you think that room vanishes from awareness, but that's not how I understand awareness, because for me, awareness is like, imagine that you fell asleep at night and you had a dream.
Okay.
The entire dream takes place in consciousness, or I'll say in mind, you know. So the entire dream takes place in your mind, but it seems as if whenever you have a dream, you have that dream from the perspective of a character in the dream. You know what I mean? You look down and you have hands and feet. But the mind that's having the dream isn't located in the dreamed body.
Yeah.
The body appears in the dreaming mind. So shut the door. The contents of the room aren't disappearing from awareness.
No.
Because it's like the world that you experience, the so-called external world, is what God's mind, what God's infinite consciousness looks like from the point of view of your limited mind. So the content of the room,
so
from awareness, the contents of the room are made of awareness, because physical, like the world is real, but the world is made out of physical objective matter. The world is made out of you know what I mean?
Yeah. So let me try and simplify or break it down. So it's kind of like let's say God isn't really a being, but it's kind of like God is having a dream, and where everything is a character within a dream. Every single atom, every single fiber of existence is like, played by God in that dream, really. Could you argue that? Is that a way of looking at it, or?
Yeah, but you've got to be careful to not give any existence to the physical world, because we come into contact with some kind of objective physical world. All that we ever come into contact with is the subjective consciousness. So you can't say that every single part of the universe is aware.
No.
Because you never come into contact with the universe separate from consciousness.
No.
So it's not solipsism. Like, I'm not saying that all there is my own mind, because there are multiple minds. It doesn't mean that everything is aware, because there aren't any things to be aware. There's just consciousness, which contracts itself into multiple.
But that's what I mean. Like, it's not it's not like you're the only consciousness. Like, I was just saying, it's kind of like let's say, to visualize it, it's kind of like let's say I'm God, I'm having a dream, but every single bit of the dream is something I'm experienced, like I'm aware of, really. It's that kind of like, but I'm God in a way. Is that like,
Well, you are the only consciousness, but you're not the only mind. So
no.
All there is reality itself is consciousness. But there are multiple minds that are, because in order to experience like an objective world, God's mind has to contract itself into a finite perspective. Because if that didn't happen, then God wouldn't be able to experience the world, because you can only experience like a finite world from a finite perspective.
Yeah, but
what I mean by that, when you have a dream and you enter into that dream as a finite character and you view that dream from a finite perspective, if you did your perception of one finite perspective, finite object wouldn't be able to appear. So there are multiple perspectives. So like me and you are two minds, two perspectives with the same consciousness, the same field of consciousness.
Okay, so it's kind of like everyone's a different mind, but everyone's kind of like, plugged into this matrix in a way. Everyone's plugged into the world in a way, like, but goddamn, like, how do you feel about this, Meg? I'm just trying to wrap my head around this theory, but it's because it's such an esoteric theory that I just can't seem to, like, But how do you feel, Meg?
Very confused, to be honest. I think I understand where you're coming from. Yeah. Yeah, I don't really know how to articulate a response because my mind's still kind of whirring from that.
Yeah.
No, I get what you're trying to say, that all there is consciousness, and that does make a lot of sense because that's all we can know.
Yeah, because
but it just blows my mind a little bit. Like it has a very solid ground, but it does just blow my mind a lot.
It seems very scientific to me, because if consciousness is all that we ever experience, then where's the validity in claiming that there's anything else? Until we get some kind of evidence that there's something other than consciousness, how can you legitimately claim that there is. You know what I mean?
No, exactly. Yeah, like that
Yeah.
makes loads of sense. Like this is all we can know, so why isn't it just reality? I can get on board with that, to be fair. Yeah, I think I need to do a bit more reading up on non-dualism to understand you completely, but I kind of see where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm. So I'm agreeing with Meg here, like that I need to I'm really interested. I really want to do more reading, but at the moment, like I'm just not in a position where like, I can really like. I mean, it can sort of like pick your brain, like sort of like create thoughts,
Feel
but
free. Feel free.
yeah, that's what I mean. But to move on to something that isn't just racking our brains, that like I was about to say, so we know how you got into that philosophy. What got you into philosophy straight up, like in the first place? What kind of drew you to it as a subject?
Hey,
Yeah.
well, it's like I said before, like when I was a teenager, I wasn't in a very good place mentally, and
No.
like uh, the ordinary way of looking at things is kind of depressing. Like there's this big physical world that's kind of doesn't care about you, and
Mm-hmm.
the Big Bang and physical matter forms into planets. On the planet appears this physical human being, physical human body, and then the physical brain and the human being gets so
Mm-hmm.
complex that it produces consciousness as a byproduct. So what you are is like this limited, finite, temporary little bubble of life living inside a giant hunk of flesh. And it's just a kind of inherently depressing worldview, because the human race is doomed, because inevitably we're all going to die because, our bodies are going to get old and be destroyed and stuff. And life is so fleeting and so precious and it's inherently, and then but then when I started listening to Wall and Watts and stuff, I realized that that isn't true, like really, like I said, all you ever come into contact with is consciousness. All you ever come into contact with is yourself. So how is it possible for you to die? Where could you go? Like you are reality itself, you know what I mean? So it cheers us up immensely.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Meg? Like, what? Oh, that. Wait. How about you, Meg? Like, what got you into philosophy? Because, like, just overall, not even just your dissertation, but general philosophy. What got you in?
So my answer's a little bit boring, to be honest.
No, it's not.
But as a kid, well, not even as a kid, as a 15-year-old, I was very naughty and I didn't like school and I was a truant and I didn't really
Okay.
go.
Really?
I played up a lot and my RE teacher was the only person who believed in me. And he was so lovely. Shout out to Mr. Key. He was so lovely and he kept me going and he got me through my GCSEs and got me some really good grades, but RE was my best grade.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, that really surprises me because you don't come across as like a troublemaker. Like, you're probably one of the
Even
most,
actual teacher.
yeah, like, you come across as one of the most mild-mannered, like, people I know,
Do you
honestly.
think?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, thanks. But no, I am now, but I wasn't. I was a little shit, really. And then my philosophy teacher at A level was lovely, and she pushed me, and I came out with an A in it, and
Oh,
here I am
nice.
on a philosophy degree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's about it. Like, it's nothing exciting. It's just more. They were the only teachers that believed in me and made me believe I could do something with my life. So here we are.
I mean, I guess one conclusion we can like reach from this is that philosophy just reaches out to people. Like with
It
you,
really does.
yeah, like with you, how he was like, feeling quite like depressed, and Alan Watts reached out to him. Philosophy, like, philosophers kind of like, took you in, like, gave you something to be interested by, like, to, cause I mean, even when you were younger, did you ever like, wonder about like whether we even exist or like, am I the only thing existing? Did you ever have like solipsistic thoughts?
I think everyone has like funny thoughts and stuff. I'm not sure if I was particularly interested in philosophy from an early age. Well, I was always quite academic, but it was always more like maths and science kind of thing.
Yeah, cause I mean, I always had those like, not prominently, but occasionally I would think like, what if everyone's a cyborg, or like, what if everyone's like a robot and I'm the only human? Like, just versions of solipsism, like, that's kind of what drew me to philosophy. Like, that I always had these little philosophical conundrums inside my head when I was younger, and then, like, did you ever have any of those, Meg? Because
Yeah, definitely. Like little 9-year-old me would sit on the sofa with my parents, and then like my mind would drift, and I'd be like, "Why am I here? What's beyond the the earth?" You know, like thinking all I am going to do for the rest of my life is wander this earth, stuff like that.
I mean,
You know,
honestly, like
I used to have very deep thought. I used to have very deep thoughts as a kid.
I mean, I think all kids do. Like, I mean, I haven't met a kid that hasn't, or like at least someone who I've discussed this with. Like, haven't met anyone who hasn't really had those thoughts at least one point in their life. Like,
No. Well, if you think about it, all little kids are quite philosophical, aren't they? Like, why is the sky blue? Why is the grass green? Things like that is quite philosophical in its nature. Very, very inquisitive.
exactly. Like, I think because the first philosophers, like, were probably just like cavemen who thought, oh, why do we exist or whatever. Like, but then, I mean, everyone is a philosopher at heart. It just takes some people just write books on it.
Yeah, that's true.
Some people just like research it. Like, but I was about to say, speaking of that, everyone is philosopher. I think that would be a good like place to wrap it up, like to wrap this podcast up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's you know what, Harry, Meg, it's been great talking to you. You know, it's been great to hear all your insights. You know, good luck with your dissertation.
Thanks. I'm definitely happy to come back and talk about it when I've got a bit more research behind me. We can.
I can't wait. I cannot wait.
I'm happy to come back anytime.
Yeah. So
it was good talking.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you guys. Peace out, and yeah.